So it all began, as you all know, with the Gombe chimpanzees in Tanzania, and finding out information about them, which was surprising to many scientists. And that study, although I'm not there, is still going strong. We have a team of students, and we're in our 55th year, which is the longest unbroken study of chimpanzees and almost everything else ever in the world. So the reason I left Gombe, the forest that I love, was because in 1986, at a conference, it was all the different people studying chimps across Africa. And there was a session on conservation, which was shocking to all of us, like forests disappearing, chimpanzee numbers dropping. There was a session on conditions in medical research labs, where our closest relatives were in 5-foot by 5-foot cages, bleak, sterile. And there was some footage on the cruel training of circus chimps and the horror of having pet chimps. So that all happened. That's when I knew that I had to start being more of an activist. And since then, as I say, I've been on this mission around the world, raising awareness. And of course, we have to try and raise money. And I realized that in order to try and save the Gombe chimps, it was really important to improve the lives of the people living in crippling poverty around the tiny national park. And that program, which we call Take Care, TACARE, was so successful that the pilot of 12 villages close around Gombe is now 52 villages. And it's serving to restore the trees that were totally eliminated around the national park, and to protect the trees in the south, which hold more chimpanzees in those forests, but none of those forests are actually protected. And this program, or similar, JGI has a presence in 6 African countries now. And it was when I was traveling around the African countries talking about the problems, and then realizing that a lot of the problems were due to big corporations in Europe, America, Asia, traveling in all these other countries and meeting young people who seemed to have lost hope. And when I talked to them, they basically said, well, you've compromised our future and there's nothing we can do about it. We have compromised the future of young people. And that's why I started the Roots and Shoots program, which it began with, just as we had 12 villages, by chance we started with 12 high school students. And it's now in 140 countries around the world. The other thing that JGI, Jane Goodall Institute, does, we look after the orphan chimpanzees whose mothers were shot, mostly for the illegal bushmeat trade. So there, in a nutshell, is what keeps me busy. Well, because I'm traveling everywhere, when I go to a country, I'm almost always bombarded with the facts. And, you know, Jane, could you please talk about, like here, for example, the prairie dogs, because they're part of the prairie ecosystem. And without the prairie dogs, the black-footed ferret almost became extinct. It was down to 12 individuals in captivity. So I see proof everywhere I go of animals facing extinction. And the reason I wrote this book before last was called Hope for Animals and Their World. And every single chapter is about an animal which would not be with us now if it wasn't for a group of dedicated people saying, we won't let this happen. So it's really important when we're bombarded by all this doom and gloom to highlight the places where nature can be restored, animal species can be saved. Otherwise, the children, the future, the custodians of tomorrow, they'll be so depressed that they'll give up, and then we have no hope at all. And, you know, I already mentioned chimpanzees in some areas. I didn't say in some areas they've already gone, but I said that everywhere they were decreasing in numbers. And in 5 countries out of 25, they've become extinct. Orangutans face extinction. So do so many. Well, think what's happening right now with the elephants and the rhinos. And in a few days, anybody with sending out, writing, there's a march, global march for rhinos and elephants. And it's really important people get the news, and it's raising awareness. We're losing, rhinos will go first if we don't do something globally to try and stop the selling of their horns, particularly in Vietnam. And elephants in some places have gone as well. So we all have to do something about it and not let the fact that it's a huge problem stop us from doing anything because we feel we can't. And these days, the social media gives a whole new way. Once people know about something and they become passionate, through all this social media, they can alert, or together we can alert, hundreds of thousands of people around the world in a way we never could do before.
Who else has a question for Dr. Goodall? Any other questions?
What do you believe the role activism plays in regards to things like climate change and human intrusion into the natural world versus simply just being interested in the topic?
Well, as I've said, it's what I've said, if we don't all get together and take action, which is being an activist, whether it's tweeting and twittering or whether it's going out and rolling up your sleeves like the Roots and Shoots do to remove garbage from a stream, or writing letters to people who are planning to desecrate an area of natural beauty and cover it with concrete, or whether you're, as some children this morning told me, they were removing invasive plants and others were planting milkweed to try and do something to help the monarch butterfly. And one of them, quite a small kid, said, well, what we're going to do, we're going to plant milkweed right across the whole of the old migration route of the monarch butterflies. And you see, if you have roots and shoots spread across the country, that isn't as stupid as it sounds. It can be done. So this, activism is very important. Just to sit and learn about something, if you don't do anything with it, well, I don't think you'll be able to look back on your life and be very pleased with yourself if you don't do something.
Could you tell us a little bit more about your visit to prison tomorrow?
The first prison group was started in Pelican Bay State Prison, which is in California near the border with Oregon. It's I think it's the largest federal state prison in the country. And it's mostly people from the mafia, all the LA mafia. And I knew the father of an inmate, it was Latino, and he said, I wish you'd go and visit David in this jail. I had no idea how far away it was, and some silly man offered to take me in his small plane. So we got there, and I met this David, and he introduced into the prison this idea of having a Roots and Shoots group there. And what he did, which was wonderful, he found all the people who were good at art, and he gathered up their drawings. They sent the drawings to the wives, because the Latino wives are very loyal and faithful. They made them into little cards, which they sold. And that was to introduce Roots and Shoots into the schools where the children of the inmates were. And that was accompanied by a letter from the fathers saying, Billy, don't follow in my footsteps. It's really not nice being here. Just don't do it. So that was that changed when the warden changed. You have to have a supportive warden. We haven't yet managed to get it integrated into the I don't know what sort of systems there are. Anyway, then we had another one for a women's correctional institution in Danbury, Connecticut. And then Mark Beckhoff started this one. So what I'll be doing is going and really answering their questions. They've been learning about chimpanzees and other animals. And I'll try and find out before I go what I can suggest they do to make this a better world.
In the 80s, it looks like you started the Chimpanzee program, and one of the zoos you visited was the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo in Colorado Springs.
Yes.
What's the status of that program? And I know they no longer do it at the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, but have you been back to the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo since then? And what is the status of the Chimpanzee Zoo program?
Okay, first of all, I haven't been back there since they ended the program, and tragically, the Chimpanzee program in America had to stop because there wasn't any funding for it, which is absurd. It really doesn't cost much money. And I'm ashamed of that. But, you know, when you're trying to raise funds for programs all around Africa and roots and shoots in different countries, and it just collapsed. And however, it's going strong in Europe. And basically, the Chimpanzee program was working with keepers and with zoo administration. It was to have one particular way of collecting information in all these different zoos that took part, so that if one of them said the chimpanzee made a pant grunt sound, that everybody would know what that was. It would be the same everywhere. And so it was going to try and look at the variation in chimp behavior and culture in all these different settings and see how that related to perhaps the kind of environment they were in. But a key element was improving conditions for the chimps, and particularly through environment enrichment, giving them puzzles to solve, giving them something to do. Because boredom is one of the terrible, terrible miseries for intelligent creatures like chimpanzees, gorillas, elephants, and so forth. So we hope to start it up again. I've never given up on anything yet, and it is a good idea, so it will start again. And we're getting a new team of fundraisers into JGI, Jane Goodall Institute. So I have great hopes that it will start again.
I wanted to thank you for being outspoken against places like SeaWorld and being so involved in the anti-captivity movement. And with films like The Cove and Blackfish over the past 6 years, there's been a massive shift of people realizing the truth behind these amusement parks. Just this week, federal judges denied the Georgia Aquarium being able to import 18 belugas, which is amazing. And I just want to know your thoughts on the future of the captivity industry and these places, and is there hope, and why should we not lose hope that we can empty the tanks?
Well, the thing is that people muddle up aquariums and zoos and entertainment and all the rest of it. So there are some creatures which just don't belong in captivity. Whales and dolphins are among those animals. Elephants are another. Unless you have a huge area, in other words, it's a sanctuary, they don't belong in zoos. And I think if I put myself in an elephant's position, I think I know them well enough to know that they're not happy in zoos. On the other hand, a really good zoo, which one provides the right kind of environment enrichment, knowledgeable keepers, and puts a percentage of the gate money to help conservation efforts in the country of origin of the species, does a lot for education. And people say to me, oh yes, but now we have documentaries, we have films. Children don't need to see an animal in a zoo. They can look at a film. Yes, you can look at the film and learn a lot about the way they live. But for a small child, one day he watches a film of elephants. The next day, it's a film of dinosaurs, and they're so realistic now. How does the child know the difference? Oh, dinosaurs, they're not real. They were made, well, then the elephants probably aren't real either. Whereas when you go to a zoo, there's something about the actual presence, the beingness of an animal in a good zoo where it's well cared for and relatively okay, and looking into the eye and just feeling the presence. Smelling the smell. It's very different from a film. It's not so bad when you get up to high school level. Those at that age, you can work out the reality of films. But a little child, no, how could you? We live in such a virtual world today. It's one of the big problems that Roots and Shoots tries to address, is to get young people out into nature. Also, I don't know, maybe one of you can tell me, what is the attitude in Colorado towards genetically modified foods? Yeah?
We don't want them here.
You don't want them here. Are you aware of the DARK Act? The DARK Act, its proper name is, it's something about, do you remember food? No, that's what DARK Act is, but the original name, the proper name of the bill is something about, we'll tell you in a minute. DARK is denying Americans the right to know. There is a bill that's been, you need to know this. I just found out about it 2 weeks ago. There is a bill, which we're calling the DARK Act, that actually passed Congress in July when nobody's there, so they snuck it in. Now it has to go through the Senate. And so far, the Republican who's proposing the bill hasn't found a Democratic partner to whatever you do with the bill. But it's now said he'll probably go it on his own. So what this is doing, it's saying that no state will have the power to overturn any ruling made by the federal government. And they are saying this bill is, no state will have the right to enforce labeling. Now that is really important. And Americans need to know about it. This is a total usurping of the power of the individual states to have a say in what the state wants. What do the citizens in the state want? Is this democracy or what? It's very much like in the UK with fracking. People don't want the country fracked. And there are little earthquakes coming along, but the government has overruled any private concerns in the different counties.